Good to see all of you. This is part 7, the last session of our True Light series. Why do we call it True Light? It's called True Light because of John 1:9, where John was writing. He was actually writing about John the Baptist, but then for a moment he switched gears and he said John the Baptist was not that light. And then he talked about Jesus and he said that Jesus was that true light that had come into the world. In fact, he said that was the true light, which gives light to every man, and I added in, I think it's safe, man, woman, and child, every person coming into the world. Some translations say Jesus coming into the world gave light to everybody, but either way, it means that prior to Jesus, we had no light. We had no light. We needed Jesus to come and shed the light on a dark, dark world. And we have been going through, this is 7 parts in. This is it. This is the last one for 11 months, okay? But what we've been doing is, as we're looking at the true light and looking at the light of Christ and the birth of Christ, we have spent time highlighting the dark background against which the light of the birth of Jesus is set against. Because as we've gone through, and we started way back in Isaiah, we went through Micah, we went through Luke, and we looked at the prophecy and birth of John the Baptist. All of these, at each step of the way, there's been this wonderful sense of hope, because that's what Christmas is. It's hope. We're celebrating hope, the birth of hope. However, it's that much greater. It is magnified that much more because of the dark times against the dark times against which each of these sessions has been set against. Every step of the way in the Christmas story, every time there was a prophecy, every time there was a birth, every time when Jesus was born, I mean, it's always been against a dark background in society, in history. And so we've been looking at that and that contrast. And so we call it True Light because of John 1:9, but we call it True Light because of Jesus. That's what we are celebrating. Now, today we are going to be in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 18. Those of you that have been here for every session and you've been taking notes, you may start to write and go, wait a minute. Weren't we in Matthew chapter 2 on Wednesday? In fact, we were. Those of you that were here on Wednesday, we were. However, that night, on Wednesday night, we highlighted the wise men, their journey, their approach to seeing the babe Jesus, or the young child. We saw their worship and their gifts that they presented to him. And so today we are looking at the same passage of Scripture. However, we are not highlighting the wise men. Obviously, as we read through, we will see them. But really what we are looking at today is a man named Herod. Now, what a strange thing. And look at these main divisions. Look at these main divisions: disturbed, deceptive, and deadly. We're looking at a man named Herod, and we've got 3 main divisions called disturbed, deceptive, and deadly. This does not sound like a Christmas message to me. I mean, is this fitting for a Christmas Eve, and it's, today's Christmas Eve, the eve of Christmas. Does this sound like something that we want to have on our minds as we head into the evening, those of us that are coming back at 4 o'clock for service tonight in the sanctuary? Do you want to be thinking disturbed, deceptive, and deadly? Do you want those phrases on your mind as you head into tomorrow morning? Some of you are Christmas Eve people. You come from a Christmas Eve family, meaning tonight at midnight, you'll start to tear open packages. That's the way your family does it. And then there are those of you that are Christmas morning. Some of you will get up tomorrow morning. You barely get any sleep tonight. And then you'll wake up tomorrow morning excited and you'll tear open packages then. You didn't ask, but I'll tell you anyways. My family's Christmas will be on Tuesday afternoon. Doesn't sound very Christmassy, does it? But we're busy and it's hard to get everybody together, so we're doing it Tuesday afternoon. But are these words that I want, as I head into the Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, disturbed and deceptive and deadly? And some of you may be thinking, yeah, that sounds like my brother or my sister, and so yeah, it's accurate, but we're talking about a man named Herod. And why would we be focusing on him? For the same reason that the world was focused on a man named Napoleon in the winter of 1809. He and his army were sweeping through Austria and destroying every opposition in his way. And the world was unsure. The international political scene was just in a tailspin because of all of this. And the world was focused on that. Same thing with the birth of Christ. Remember how Joseph and Mary and eventually Jesus got to Jerusalem? It was because the Roman king had made a decree and said, hey, everybody's got to be registered. Go back to the cities, that your family have come from, and go back there. And so all of the political, or all of the focus was on the political world. And yet some incredible things were happening. Now, we are going to open up here to this section, Disturbed, which is the first 6 verses, and we'll have a couple of subpoints under there for those of you that take notes. But we start with the section on Disturbed. Let's find out what's going on here as we open up to verse 1. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. So we have Matthew here, and again, if you were here on Wednesday, we looked at some of this, however, not in too much detail. In fact, we keep mentioning Herod throughout these sessions, and I keep telling you, I'll tell you more about him. I'll tell you more about him. I'll tell you more about him. Well, today you're going to hear more about him. However, not right now. Herod, though, I can say, was a wicked individual. And so you have these, kind of like characters in a story. Now, this is a true story, but notice that it was after Jesus was born. Some Bible teachers believe that this could have actually been up to 2 years after Jesus was born. We'll talk about why some Bible teachers believe that a little bit later. But after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king. Now what Matthew is doing is, he's telling us, he's dating it for us, and he's telling us that the times in which this story took place, or this segment of the Christmas story, was a very dark time. By mentioning Herod, anybody that was vaguely familiar with Herod and Roman history, the readers that would be reading Matthew's commentary here, or his witness of it, his story, his version, would understand exactly when he said Herod, the king of Judah, they would know exactly or Herod, the king of Jerusalem, they would know exactly what the climate was like, what the political climate was like, what the moral climate was like. But it also tells us that wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. Now, even if you were not here on Wednesday night, you're familiar with the wise men, right? There was 3 of them. They brought gifts. They were in the manger, right? At least to my manger scene, they are at home. However, as we read the biblical account, we realize, wait a minute, they couldn't have been there. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you've got Herod the king, you've got wise men from the east who've come to Jerusalem, and there's what they're saying in verse 2. Where is he who has been born king of the Jews? So note their question. Where is he who has been born king of the Jews? Now, we just saw in verse 1 that this was after Jesus was born, in the days of Herod the what? The king. Yes, thank you very much. In the days of Herod the king. So we've got one king on the scene already in verse 1. But now in verse 2, we hear about this, he who has been born king of the Jews. So you cannot have 2 kings. There can only be one king. And Herod would certainly agree with that statement. And this is what causes Herod to be troubled, as we find here in the next verse. But let's read verse 2. Where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. Now, again, these are verses that we oftentimes just read right through and we don't really pay attention. Now, we're not focusing on the wise men today because we've done that already, but I want you to note that they made it clear what exactly they came to do. In verse 2, we've seen a star in the east and have come to worship him. They saw some sort of star, we're not told, where it's not described for us. Did it look like the star that we have on the top of the tree? Did it look like, what did it look like? We do not know. We just know that it was a star. The wise men saw it. They deciphered that it was something special, that it was going to lead them to the Messiah. And so they began to follow it as the star was moving. Now that's strange, because normally when you look at stars, they're pretty much always there, right? They're not moving around. If the star is moving, then it's called a shooting star, okay? They're just not normally moving, but this one was moving, and so they knew that there was something different about it. We have seen a star in the east and have come to worship him. So they said right away, we've come to worship him. Now, immediately following that, in verse 3, we have, when Herod the king heard this. And so I put as one of the subpoints, heard. He was disturbed, number one, when he heard. When he heard what? When he heard the wise men say two things. Number one, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? Because you see, Herod fancied himself king of the Jews. Now, you need to know that Herod, and here's where I begin to give you a little bit of info that I've been telling you about over the weeks. Herod was not really a king. In fact, he had been put in place by the Romans who were occupying Jerusalem. And they put Herod in that place of being a king and gave him the title king. But it wasn't like he was born into it or like he was elected, to be the king. It wasn't like they chose him. He was put in place by the Romans. And so he was not even really a king. However, he loved the title. And he loved the position, and he loved the prominence that came along with that and the power that went along with that. And so he did not want anyone to challenge his position as king. So the first thing that he hears is, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? That troubles him. But there's a second thing. The second thing is that the wise men say, for we have seen a star in the east and have come to worship him. Now, this is something else that would have upset Herod, because Herod wanted all of the attention. It's not a hard thing to understand or to believe. There are so many people in this world that want everything to be all about them. I'm sure you know some people like that. It's very easy to see with celebrities today. Someone who can sing, someone who can act, someone who has some other special ability, might be an athlete. Many of them allow that to go to their heads, and they become very prideful about their position, and they become jealous of anybody who challenges that. They want all of the attention. They want all eyes on them. This is the type of man that Herod is. I'm sure there could be some kind of psychologist or psychiatrist who could study Herod and tell us why, because of his upbringing or whatever it might have been. But this is who he was. But he's troubled when he hears. And so it says, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Now, why was all Jerusalem troubled along with Herod? Was it because they loved Herod? And I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. Was it because they all loved Herod so much? No. In fact, many of them hated Herod. But they were troubled because Herod was troubled. It's like when you know that somebody is grouchy, grumpy, and you're just like, oh, they're grumpy, they're grouchy, stay away. Because you know that this individual, if they're hangry, maybe it's been two hours since they ate, and they're grouchy, you know that they'll lash out at you. And so you're just like, nah, steer clear, stay away, right? Well, same thing here. everybody knew that if Herod was troubled, was upset, got angry, that people could actually lose their lives. Herod was known for being extremely paranoid. He actually had a group of men, of soldiers, equivalent to Hitler's Gestapo. If you are familiar with World War II history at all, Hitler and the Nazi Party had something called the Gestapo. And they would go out and hunt down people that were speaking out against the Nazi Party, the Nazi regime, or against Hitler himself. And Herod had the same thing. He had a group of individuals that would go out and hunt down or investigate reports about people that were speaking against Herod or against his ruling party. And so you had, as you can imagine, people reporting one another. He wanted Jews to accept him. And so he did a couple of things. One of the things that he did was he had building projects. He was known for being a builder. Now, he himself wasn't a builder, but he ordered and funded building. So he even repaired much of the temple. And so a lot of the Jews liked that about him, but didn't like anything else about him. Now, he wanted the Jews to like him. Now, some Bible teachers believe that Herod was actually half Jew. Some Bible teachers say, no, he wasn't a Jew at all. He was an Edomite. But he wanted the Jews, nevertheless, to love him. And so he had all of these building projects. One of the things that Herod wanted to do was to inject Roman and Greek thought and way of life into Jewish society. And so he did his best to do that. He introduced games, Roman games, Greek games. Many of the traditionalists did not like Herod because of this. Now, when I say traditionalists, that is a very polite way of saying the old people. The old people did not care for Herod. Now, you all will understand this. Sometimes you like or dislike something simply based on how your parents feel about it. Now, you all are, as I look around the room, you all are sweet people, so maybe you don't do this. But there's something called, it's a rather old term, but it's called teen angst. And it's the thought that teenagers are just angry. Why? I don't know. But they're just angry. And oftentimes what you find teenagers doing, especially throughout history, and again, maybe none of you, because you all look like sweet people to me, but what you find oftentimes is that teens, people in their teens, will oftentimes go against anything that their parents like or appreciate, or they will be in favor of anything that their parents do not appreciate or dislike. Well, Herod and the traditionalists did not get along well. However, there was a group of people that loved Herod. Now, if the traditionalists did not care for Herod, guess who loved Herod during the time? Young people. And they even had a group, okay? They had their little posse. And they called themselves the Herodians. You ever heard of that? The Herodians. And so the Herodians were a group of younger people, generally speaking, who loved Herod, who wanted the Roman way of life, who wanted the Greek culture. They wanted to be Jews and practice Judaism, but they also wanted to, in their thought and in their dress and in their activities, be more modern, like the Romans, like the Greeks. The traditionalists didn't care for Herod because of the things that he was trying to inject. In fact, he, like the Romans and the Greeks, introduced the games, whether it was in the Colosseums, the fighting and the races. But do you know what the word gym? Anybody know what the word gym means? Anybody? I know what the word, like gym, like at your school, or gym. You got gym, or you go to the gym. The word Jim actually means naked. Did you know that? You look at the gym in a whole new light. Like, mom's like, you going to the gym tonight? Like, no, I canceled my membership. Not going to the gym. But the traditionalists, as you can imagine, didn't like the games because everybody was competing naked. I mean, you know that. And nobody needs to see a couple of guys running on a track naked. Nobody needs to see that, right? And so the traditionalists did not like this. That makes sense to us. We go, no, I wouldn't want to see that either, man. I'm not even talking about ancient Jerusalem. Like, I don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that. We have a hard time looking at statues, some of the old Roman and Greek statues. Like, man, you couldn't cover that stuff up. Like, what do you know? So we have a hard time. So we understand. But these are the types of things that Herod was attempting to introduce because he wanted to be modern, wanted to be Roman, wanted to be like the Greeks. Now, he hears this and he's troubled. And so here's the second thing that happens. As a result of having heard what these wise men are looking for and what they are planning to do, he goes on the hunt. That begins in verse 4. That takes us from verse 4 down to verse 6. Verses 4, 5, and 6, the hunt. 4, 5, and 6, the hunt. It says in verse 4, and when he had gathered all the chief priests, this is where it begins to get really weird. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Now, in case you do not remember, that is Micah 5, 2, and 3. And I like that the religious leaders they just kind of gave a paraphrase of those couple of verses as you go back and read it. You and I have studied through that. That was our second session when we were in the sanctuary that one Wednesday night. Some of you were here for that. But this is where it begins to get really weird. You have Herod, who's ruling over the Jews. And he hears about this new, king of the Jews and, these guys that want to worship him. And he wants all of that attention. So what he does in verse 4 is he gathers up all the chief priests, all of the religious leaders, the chief priests and the scribes. Now, my guess is that many of these chief priests and scribes probably did not even care for Herod. But if he calls, you better come, because you might lose your head. And so they show up. Now, this is the strangest thing to me, because it would indicate that Herod, being a wicked individual, gives some amount of credence. In other words, he sees the scriptures as being somewhat reliable, or else he would not have called the religious leaders together. So he calls them together and says, hey, I want you to search the scriptures. Tell me, where is this Christ, this Messiah, supposed to be born? This is crazy. And so in verse 5, they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea. So they tell him he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem. So the hunt continues. But this is the strangest thing, because Herod is a godless man. He wants to be God himself. He wants to be worshipped. He doesn't want anybody else being worshipped. And yet, he understands that there's something in the scriptures. He's probably heard about it before, maybe from those religious fanatics, those nuts, those people, something about a Messiah or something. Hey, religious leaders, get over here. Tell me, what did you find? And they tell him, well, we searched and we found this is what it says. He's supposed to be born in Bethlehem. This is also the craziest thing, because when we go to the account of Jesus being born, when we read that he was born, that he was in a manger, or that his mom laid him in a manger, remember that, swaddling cloths? Who were the first visitors? Does anybody remember who the first visitors were to that manger? Who was it? The shepherds. Thank you very much. The shifty shepherds. There is no record of chief priests and scribes coming. Evidently, they knew where he would be, but they did not bother to go and look. Wow. What a strange thing. So they say, hey, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. Now, the hunt continues, but this leads us into our next main division, which is the deceptive part. And beginning at verse 7, it says, Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. Keep that in mind. He asked them, when did you first see the star? Because what Herod's trying to do is he's hunting. He's trying to figure out, okay, when did you first see the star? I got to figure out the age of this child. That's what he's attempting to do. When did you first see the star? I mean, that's what you do. We've got open field behind our house. There's a small open field before some other houses. There are some other houses. There used to actually be a ranch back there. So I'm telling you this because from time to time, we will get rats running around the backyard. Now, I don't know how you feel about rats, but I hate rats. Like, hate. Okay? Mice, they don't freak me out so much. They're a lot smaller, a lot cuter. I still kill them when I get a chance. Okay? But rats, creepy. Okay? And so, a month or two ago, we saw a rat in the back, set up a trap, and we actually caught there were several rats. Okay? But what I always do is if somebody saw the rat outside, one of my family members, I would always ask this. I would say, well, where did you see it at? Because it's important to know where it's at, where's it active, and then you set the trap there or nearby. That's what you do, okay? Now, Herod is on the hunt, and so he wants to know, like, hey, where's it at? Where did you hear? And he hears that, it's supposed to be in Jerusalem. So check this out, verse 7. When he had secretly called the wise men, he determined for them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the young child. And when you have found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also. This is crazy. Let me tell you why. Herod, when he heard about he who had been born king of the Jews, this Messiah, he says, religious leaders, come over here. Tell me what you find. They say, oh yeah, it's prophesied. It's part of God's plan. And he's going to be in Bethlehem. So Herod knows that this is part of God's plan. But he still decides, I'm going to kill this little dude. So, in other words, I don't care what God has planned. I'm going to, in his mind, he's thinking, I'm going to defeat God's plan. Crazy. But I want you to notice here in verse 8, what he does is, he's a king. He wants to kill Jesus. But what he just did in verse 8 was that he just became a preacher. The wise men did not know where to find Jesus. So Herod goes, hey, the scriptures say in Micah that he's going to be in Bethlehem. Go find him. Isn't that crazy? He wants to kill Jesus. He wants to eliminate him. But he just became a preacher. The wise men just received a Bible study from Herod. This is the zaniest, this is the craziest thing. And then he says this in verse 8. Go and search carefully for the young child. When you have found him, bring back word to me, because I want to go worship him also. That is what we call there in verse 8 a false faith. He does not want to go and worship. What he wants to go do is go and kill the baby Jesus. That's what he wants to do. But this man is so intoxicated with power that he's ignoring all of the signs. He's ignoring all of the messages from God's word that he believes it to be real. He goes, no, the one born king of the Jews, he's going to be in Bethlehem. Go find him. This is crazy. Now this is also extremely sad because Herod had the opportunity to witness the very first Christmas. He's in Jerusalem. Bethlehem is less than 10 miles away. He could leave. He could get into his presidential motorcade. Long black limo. Or Cadillac SUV. Fully armored. And he could roll from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, a short drive away, a short trip away, and he could see Jesus with his own eyes. With his own eyes. He has the opportunity to go and bow his knee to the King of Kings, to God's Messiah, God in flesh. And instead, he says, wise men, I'm not coming with you. Go find him and then let me know where he's at. So even in the hunt, he's too prideful to go himself. Too prideful to go. I'm not going over there. Just tell me where he's at and I'll send some people to kill him. That's what he's thinking. But he's got this false faith in verse 8, and he says, let me know where he's at, that I may come and worship him also. Verse 9, when they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. So it seems that Jesus was no longer a baby, but a young child. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. Now note that they had exceedingly great joy. And they rejoiced when they saw the star. Because the star, now, my assumption, and it's just an assumption, is that they rolled into Jerusalem and the star disappeared. Because they had to ask, hey, where's the one that's been born king of the Jews? Oh, well, let me tell you. He's over here. He's supposed to be over here. And it seems that as they left Jerusalem and continued on their route to Bethlehem, that the star reappeared, or at least that's what I assume. Maybe not, but that's what it sounds like. And it says in verse 11, and when they had come into the house, not the stable, not the manger, when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We talked about these things on Wednesday night, so I won't get into it. Then being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. Now, verses 13 through 15, we'll just read these because it's part of the story and it's a great part. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. This is neat. Saying, Joseph, he's got some wild dreams, huh? Has a dream that, hey, Mary, who you're betrothed to, is going to have a baby. And he's thinking, well, I haven't been with her, and now he has this other dream, like, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. That's not something that we talk about often, but Jesus and his family went to live in Egypt for a short time. It tells us there in verse 15, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. So it actually, the fact that he went to Egypt and then came back after Herod died was fulfilling prophecy. Okay, it was prophetic. But now we get into our third and final section here, heading for home base, verses 16 through 18, titled Deadly. Now, do you remember what the wise men experienced when they saw the star over the house where Jesus was at? It was exceedingly great joy. Thank you very much. Because in verse 16 says, then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry. So you have the two different reactions to Christmas. There is the exceedingly great joy, and then there is the exceedingly great anger. It doesn't say great there, but they were exceedingly angry. And that's always been. There are people, as much as we love Jesus, there are people who hate Jesus. There are people who hate Jesus more than we love Jesus. It always has been, always will be. He was exceedingly angry because he wanted to know where Jesus was. And it says in verse 16, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem. and in all its districts, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. So verse 16, we see two subpoints. And the first is that they were exceedingly angry, verse 16. Exceedingly angry. And the fact that they were exceedingly angry led to the second subpoint, and that is that he executed the helpless, also in verse 16. He executed the helpless. It's not just that he executed the innocent. It wasn't just that he executed the innocent. Because there are those who are innocent, but they can still defend themselves. Not so with this group of individuals. He executed the helpless. Notice who he executed in verse 16. All the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its districts from 2 years old and under. Now, why all of the male children in that district, in Bethlehem and in all its districts? Because he knew that this Messiah was supposed to be a boy. So, as he's hunting, he goes, okay, I know we're looking for a boy. But then secondly, we know that he was supposed to be in Bethlehem, or at least in those districts. So he spreads this net to cover Bethlehem and the districts around Bethlehem. But then also from 2 years old and under. Now, why did he pick 2-year and younger boys? Why would he do that? Because it tells us in verse 16, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. So he had asked the wise men, remember that? Hey, when did you first see the star? And they told him, we're not told that information, but they told him, well, we saw it whenever it was. And so he determined from that, okay, as he's sending out his murderous army to look for little 2-year-old boys, he's saying, listen, we're looking for boys in the Jerusalem or in the area of Jerusalem, and they've got to be 2 years old or younger. Anybody 2 years old or younger, kill them, eliminate them. So it's possible that the wise men had been traveling for 2 years. Possible. It may have been that they said, well, we saw the star 2 years ago, and we've been traveling ever since following this thing. Or maybe it wasn't that long, when he just figured, well, they said a year, but we're going to go 2 years just to make sure that we get them. Let's catch them. I don't know what it was. But he determined 2 years old and under. And so that's why I said that some Bible teachers believe that Jesus could have actually been 2 years old by now. But we do not know that for sure. That's not indicated for us. We just know that he was a young child. But what causes a man to become exceedingly angry at the birth of a child? So much so that he executed the helpless. A man that is intoxicated with power. And that was Herod. When Herod became king, the first thing that he did was to eliminate the previous ruling family. They were the Asmoneans. You can go back and fact check this on your own. He eliminated the entire family, except for probably a few, but at least one significant family member. I'll tell you about her in just a moment. Herod had a wife named Dolores. And he divorced Dolores in order to marry a woman named Mariamne. Why did he marry Mariamne? Mariamne was actually one of the Asmoneans, from the Asmonean family. You go, well, I thought he wanted to kill them all. He did. He eliminated the Asmoneans. Why would he eliminate the Asmoneans? Because, as I mentioned, they were the ruling family before he got there. And many of the Jews liked the Asmoneans. So you can imagine, it's kind of a bad situation where you have the ruling party still there, or at least the previous ruling party, and so they know how to rule, but also the people that they're ruling really like that family. And then here you are, and a lot of people don't like you. So he decided, wipe out the Asmoneans. That way, there's no chance of them taking over my throne. But he obviously saved at least one and married Mariamne. He did that because the Jews liked the Asmoneans, and he figured, listen, I want the people to like me. So I am going to marry one of the Asmoneans, Mariamne. I mean, we go, man, that's crazy. Well, celebrities do all kinds of crazy things these days. just for attention, just to get people to like him. Okay? So it's not really that crazy. I mean, it is crazy, but it's not really that, it's not abnormal. People do that all the time. Soon after becoming king, or at least being placed into that position, he annihilated the Sanhedrin. That was a group that was like a Jewish group. They were like a religious political group. He annihilated them. He slaughtered 300 court officers. 300 court officers. Later, he had murdered or assassinated his own wife, Mary Amni. What? He divorced his first wife, married Mary Amni, and now he's assassinating her. Yes. He assassinated Mary Amni, and check this out, his mother-in-law. Okay? Don't get any ideas. He assassinated Mary Amni and her mother, Alexandra, because, being paranoid, he believed that they were trying to take his throne, his position away. And so in order to protect his position, he had him eliminated. He also had murdered or assassinated his eldest son, Antipater. Didn't stop there. He had two other sons, Alexander and Aristobulus, had them assassinated because he was afraid that they were trying to take his kingdom. Before he died, he gave orders to his henchmen, his assistants, and the order was this: when I die, I want you to assassinate these members of my ruling party, his own ruling party. He says, I want you to assassinate all of these members of my ruling party. It is believed that he did that because he knew that when he died, people were going to party. They were going to rejoice in the streets. And so in order to prevent rejoicing at his own death, he ordered the killing of his own members of his ruling party so that there would be some crying associated with his death. The man's mind was out of order. This is the type of individual that was ruling when Jesus was born, when John the Baptist was born, when sweet little Mary was traveling to Bethlehem. This is what was going on. It was against that dark background that all of this took place. Now, in verses 17 and 18, this is where we finish. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping, and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. And quoted from Jeremiah 31:15. So Napoleon, in the winter of 1809, pushing his way across Austria, mowing down every form of opposition, all eyes were on Napoleon. But there was something going on in the United States that same year, in fact, in the winter of 1809. 3 individuals were born, January and February. The first was a strange little boy and a little man named Edgar Poe. He later adopted the name Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know how many of you are aware of him. But he greatly affected the literary world. In fact, he is often referred to as America's Shakespeare. There was another baby boy born to a couple of parents. They named him Charles, last name Darwin. Now you and I, we go, man, we're Christians, man. We don't do the evolution thing. I know. But this little baby would one day greatly affect the scientific world, even if his thoughts were cuckoo. There was one more baby boy born in Hardin County, Kentucky, that cold 1809, winter of 1809, in a log cabin. His name was Abraham Lincoln, who would one day grow to greatly affect not only American society, but also the world, by leading the Northern Army against the Southern, winning the Civil War, and soon after abolishing slavery. You see, as all eyes were on Austria and Napoleon and all that was happening there, and everything was so unsure, and the international political scene was just so topsy-turvy, so unsure, unsettled. As all eyes were on Austria, 3 little boys were born in the winter of 1809, that same year, same time, who would literally change the world, each in their own ways. You and I have got to be careful. There is so much going on politically in our own country. So many negative things to focus on. There's still a war going on in Ukraine, one going on in Israel, the Middle East. Things are so unsure, so topsy-turvy. Add to that the life of a teenager and all that goes along with that. Emotions and drama and family problems and possibilities. And all of those things make it so easy to become distracted and miss the celebration of baby Jesus. You and I, whether we are Christmas Evers or Christmas morning people, we have got to make sure that our eyes, our hearts, us, the very core of our being, is centered on and focused on and locked into the fact that we are celebrating the birth of Jesus. It is not my birthday. It is not your birthday. It is the birth of Jesus that we are celebrating. And if you and I can keep that at the center of all that we're doing today, tomorrow, I guarantee you this. I guarantee this is a money-back guarantee. If you can keep that at the center of all that you are doing, it will not matter what you get or do not get over the next several hours. Because you will be satisfied with Jesus. And you'll go, hey, man, doesn't matter what I got or didn't get, because it's not my birthday. It's Jesus' birthday. Father, thank you so much for this morning, for your